Howdy, my good friends. I'm Larry Bentley. I was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains by generations of mountain folk who passed down the stories you're fixing to hear. Together, we'll look through the eyes of an Appalachian at the murders, mysteries, legends, and forgotten history that these old mountains hold. And every now and again, we'll wander a little beyond them, too. Welcome to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you for stopping by. Now, we're about to dive into a story that still chills the hollers of my old stomping grounds in southwest Virginia. This time we're headed down to a little town called Chilhowie. If you ain't never been there, then I can't possibly do it justice on a podcast. But I can say that if you're looking for a beautiful place to visit with a nice hometown folks around, that's one of the many Appalachian towns I'd say that you need to add to your list. That's where a tragedy left a skid mark that never really washed away, even long after the search parties had gone home and the headlines done faded. This is a story of a young girl named Sharon Blankenbeckler, whose life was cut way on too short on the slopes of Walker Mountain back in March of 1977. Now, if you're familiar with Big and Little Walker Mountains, you already know that there's enough weird tied to them to last a whole entire lifetime. I can sure enough say that near about every time that I've ever went out into them mountains, I've, let's just say experienced something that crawled my nape. It's just one of them places in the Appalachian Mountains that have that uneasy feeling in a whole lot of places. I believe that this story is one of the reasons why. So, pull you up a chair. This one's going to be a sad one that starts with a slow burn that crawls up your spine and sets up housekeeping in your heart. I ain't going to sugarcoat this one or dress it up in a Sunday clothes because you don't put perfume on a hog and take it to church. This here's stories about as joyful as a rain-soaked graveyard and twice as stubborn about leaving your mind once it gets there. Now, Sharon Blankenbeckler wasn't some mysterious figure or wild-eyed drifter wandering the hills of southwest Virginia like a maniac. She was just a regular young woman living a regular mountain life. Now, the kind of person you'd pass in the grocery store or speak to if you caught eyes, or whose name you might recognize if somebody mentioned it at church. She worked, shopped, and spent her time with her folks. She was as ordinary as peach cobbler on Sunday. And if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that no matter how much we like to think so, well, ordinary don't mean safe, not by a long shot. March 14th, 1977, started out like any other day at Chilhowie, Virginia. No lightning flashing, thunder rolling in the distance, like you'd see in the movies. In fact, there was no sense at all that the world that Sharon and her family knew was a fixing to flip on its side. For her, it was just another trip downtown Marion to hit the Kmart. Back in, folks, Kmart weren't some store, it's just some store, I guess we'd say. We're talking pre-superstore here. Kmart was the first place that I saw as a young feller where you could get your groceries, your socks, fishing pole, and maybe make a bad life decision all under one roof. Folks in Marion didn't just shop there. They pretty much loitered around there and spent time. They talked, caught up on who's doing what they maybe oughtn't. But typical kind of mountain hang where everybody that was out and about, well, they just go there and pass a little time. Sharon had her arms full of groceries and, everyday things that you pick up to go. And that's when she had in her arms when she left. Now, the kind of items that I'd say I'd be home, before you even know I'm gone. It was just a quick stop. The problem was, well, she didn't make it home. Somewhere along Walker Mountain, her tire went flat. Now, let me tell you, that right there's enough to send your giblets up just a mite. Sometimes somebody's story changes forever because of one flat tire. If you happen to have been through there, then you sure enough know what I'm talking about. Back then, them stretches of mountain road weren't what you'd call well traveled. You could sit there right smart while before another car might show up or may not show up or come along. And if one did, even though most folks in that little mountain town there would give you the shirt right off the back, not everybody that stopped by there is from there, or showing up to lend a hand, but for anybody but themselves. So Sharon was there alone, stuck on the side of the road in a place where the mountains were the only thing watching. That's when things went wrong, and folks, I mean real wrong. Sharon didn't show up where she was supposed to be, and folks started to worry. And in a place like Smith County, worry don't stay quiet for long. It spreads through the hollers and over the ridges faster than a wildfire in the wind. The sheriff's office got the call, and before you know it, they were fully involved in it. Now, what that looks like today is a blame sight different than what it looked like in 1977. Now, you might think I'm just spouting off, but I remember them roads. In 1977, I just got my brand new driver's license and was aiming to wear it plumb out. Them mountains seemed mighty big to a young feller, and I remember when this happened. I can tell you that Smith County wasn't, and still ain't, some big city operation to start with, because, well, it didn't need to be. And though it's bigger today, them big fancy labs with teams of specialists, well, that type of thing was just starting to catch on in 1977, and you usually only saw that in the big city type of operations, or maybe with the FBI. Smith County is what we call rural Virginia. They didn't have any big crew of deputies. They had just enough to get the job done, and they were supported by some volunteers on top of that. And folks, they had a whole lot of ground to cover there. Search parties went out on foot. I mean, boots in the dirt. I was watching tree lines, ditches, and hollers. People fanned out like they were looking for a gold coin in the hayfield. And that's saying something, because them mountains, well, folks, they ain't ever like giving up anything easy. Well, at least until they're ready to do it. Hours turned into more hours, then days turned into more days. Every hour that passed tightened that knot in everybody's chest. Because deep down, after a certain time, folks knew the truth. They just didn't want to say it out loud. That was that this wasn't going to end with Sharon walking out of them woods dusty and just a little shook up. It was late March, folks, when they finally found her. And what they found wasn't just tragic. Well, it was outright brutal. Now, the kind of scene that sticks with people that have to go down and see it. Trust me when I tell you that things like that don't wash out of your mind, no matter how many years you stack on top of it. I remember that it seemed like all of Southwest Virginia's heart just plumb broke at that point. But to me, it was like there was something else mixed in with that grief. I reckon it was probably fear. You could hear a newscaster's voice, and you could hear it in his voice as he talked about it on TV. Because when something like that happens in a place where everybody knows everybody, it means one of two things. Either somebody from your own backyard did it, or somebody passing through that nobody saw coming. And both of them options will keep your head on a swivel and keep you up at night. The investigation started up because now it weren't no missing persons case anymore. It was a murder of the worst kind. Right from the start, it was like trying to grab smoke with your bare hands and stuff it in a potato sack. Now, they retraced Sharon's route, every mile, every turn, every possible stop. But the trail, well, it wasn't just thin, it was downright dingy. You'd think a crime like that would leave behind a trail of breadcrumbs, but nope. This one was more like somebody sanitized the whole area right behind herself. Investigators worked with what they had, which was witness statements, fingerprints, fibers. Compared to today's technologies, investigators were trying to solve a 1,000-piece puzzle with half the pieces missing. But they did what they could with what they had to work with and pressed on. Neighbors, well, they at least talked a little. See, our small towns got their own way of dealing with things. On one hand, Everybody knows everybody else's business. On the other hand, nobody wants to be the one that says something that stirs up a passel of trouble. You'll hear folks say, "Well, I don't want to get involved," right before they lean in and whisper the exact thing that just might matter. Kind of like the birth of better news sitting around the ladies' meeting at the church, taking the blade, folks, and walking out like nobody said a thing. And then there's loyalty, family ties, friendships that go back generations. That kind of thing can make people real selective about what they remember sometimes and what they forget. So investigators got bits and pieces. Somebody saw a car, remembered a stranger, or thought they saw a vehicle that didn't belong, but nothing solid enough to hang your hat on, well, or a case either. Now, as much as folks don't like to hear it, when something like that happens, investigators always start close to home. That means family, relationships, and yeah, that means your husband, Frank. Now, before anybody gets their britches in a twist, that ain't no accusation. It's procedure. Statistics don't lie, and they sure don't care about twisted up britches. Most violent crimes against women, well, they involve somebody the victim knew, so they looked into it. Well, they had to. And in a small town, that kind of thing don't go unnoticed. People started talking. They always do. But here's the thing. Talk's pretty cheap when it comes to proof. Evidence is what goes to the bank. And in this case, evidence stayed out about as cooperative as a mule in 90-degree heat that hadn't been watered right. Investigators widened that net. They looked at folks with filing histories, people passing through, which was nigh on impossible because folks passing through don't normally sign no register. Anybody at all that might have had the chance to do something like that. So they chased down leads that went nowhere, followed tips that fizzled out like a wet match, and then came the thing that always gets folks' hopes up. I don't know how many times we've been wondering where the story's going to go next, but there comes a confession, or at least the rumor of one. Now, I don't know what it is about people and loose lips after a few drinks, but you get enough alcohol in somebody, and all of a sudden they either think they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, or they start running their yap about things they shouldn't. Heck, maybe both. Word started floating around that a man had talked, said something about the case, maybe more than something. But the time law enforcement caught the wind of it and tried to pin it down, well, memories got real fuzzy real quick. Stories changed, and when you know it, our old friend alcohol got the blame. And what might have been something turned into nothing quicker than it ever blew up. Hearsay don't hold up in court, not unless you can back it up. And in this case, it slipped right through their fingers. Now imagine being Sharon's family through all this, though. You hear there might be a confession, get your hope all worked up, just to be dashed to bits on the rocks of life. And it don't die quiet. It rips out a hunk of you, carries it off like a coyote that grabbed a piece of chicken and took off with it. That's a kind of emotional whiplash that'll wear a person plumb down, plumb to the bone, I'm telling you. By the time the 1980s rolled around, the case had gone ice cold. Files boxed up, evidence stored away. Investigators moved on to the next big thing that had to have their attention when no choice in it. But don't believe for a second that it meant it was over with, because cases like that, well, they just don't end, they just wait. Time marched on like it always does. Scientists had understood DNA for years, but it wasn't until the 1980s that investigators started using DNA profiling to solve crimes. Once they did, cold cases all over the country, all of a sudden had a second chance. When that came down, it changed the game in folks' way back in 1977. Well, they couldn't even have dreamed of. All of a sudden, here comes hope riding into town on its big white horse again. Maybe something left behind, hair fibers, biological traces, could finally point to who did that. But here's the problem. Evidence preservation back then wasn't what it is now. Some things were kept, some weren't, and even the stuff that was, well, time has a way of wearing things down. Still, every now and again, cases like this get pulled back out, looked at with a fresh set of eyes, and new methods get thrown in the mix as folks develop them. Because all it takes is one break. All it takes is one card pulled from the bottom, and the whole house comes tumbling down around the piece of dog squeeze that did it. So here we are, nearly 50 years later. Walker Mountain still stands there like she always has. Same trees, same roads, and same uneasy feeling if you know where to stand. It'll blow in on you like a light mountain breeze. Sharon's story, well, it's still there too. In memories, whispers, and in the hearts of the people that refuse to let her be forgot about. And I'll tell you something else. Places like that, they don't forget. You can walk them roads today, and if you listen real careful, it's like the mountain itself is carrying the weight of what happened. Not in some spooky ghost story way, in a real way. In the kind of way that makes you slow down a little and take a little more look around you. So what happened to Sharon Blankenbeckler? Well, that's the question that's been hanging in the air all these years. Was it somebody she knew? Somebody that saw an opportunity and took it? Or was it a stranger just passing through that crossed her path at the worst possible time? Now, we don't know. And that right there is what makes this one stick to your ribs. But here's what we do know for sure. Her life mattered. Her story mattered. And every time it's told, it keeps that memory alive just a little bit longer. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. Mountains hold secrets, but they hold lessons too. Pay attention to your surroundings. Trust your instinct. Don't ever assume ordinary means safe. I appreciate you sitting with me through this one. Till next time, keep your eyes on the road, your ears tuned in to the quiet, and your mind open. I hope you got something out of our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, or Rumble, throw us a like, and don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you watch or listen. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend Podcast Group on Facebook, where we talk Appalachian or about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend, and I will see you then.